thanks for having me. This is an awesome place you got here.
Yeah.
I'm jealous. Gives me a lot of ideas for my property, really.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I love it out here. And it was cool touring your place too. It's just like a canvas. You can really do whatever you want out there. It's pretty neat. I need a shooting range like yours though. That's what's
Well, come on
inspired
out
me.
anytime. You're always welcome.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Anyhow, so let's get started with your childhood. So where'd you grow up?
Uh, I was born in California, like Bay Area. I pretty much grew up in the Sacramento area, and that's kind of where we met the Stone family. Spencer being the other guy on the terrorist attack. We kind of my parents got divorced when I was, I don't know, like 5. And so my mom moved to like Carmichael, Fair Oaks part of Sacramento and grew up there until I was about 15, got kicked out of my mom's house. Just, getting into trouble with Spencer constantly, and then moved in with my dad. And shortly thereafter, he was like, hey, when you graduate high school, do you want to move up to Oregon? And I'm like, California is kind of lame. Let's just move up to Oregon now. And so I've been there. I've been up in Roseburg ever since I was, a junior in high school. And so, yeah, Roseburg and now Winston ever since.
Nice. Play any sports in high school?
Soccer when I was like younger, and then high school I played football and lacrosse. Only 1 year of football, only 2 years of lacrosse. So didn't really specialize in anything. But, I was always active, just never really had the discipline.
Yeah. Getting any trouble? A little bit of trouble, maybe?
Yeah, a lot of trouble growing up with Spencer. I mean, it was really nothing out of the ordinary, but we were going to like a private Christian school that was a little, I don't want to say cult-like, but a little bit too involved in the people's personal lives that were going there. And so that's a whole nother story. But anyway, they were like, we think it would be best if Alek moved in with his dad. And so my mom had me move in with my dad. And like I said, and that's kind of the reason I live in Oregon. Most of my family's still in California, just me and my dad up here. So I go down there quite a bit. But one of the best choices I didn't make for myself, but I would never go back.
Yeah, dude, that's interesting. We were living in Southern California for like 4 years. My dad was there for work, I think like 6th grade through junior high pretty much. And moving back up to Oregon was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Like they were getting in so much trouble down there. It's like another world.
Oregon's fantastic. I mean, Oregon's terrible. Don't move here. But for the people that are already here, it is a great place to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're not in like, Portland?
Yeah, exactly. We are kind of in the southwestern part of the state where it's still pretty conservative. The state's terrible, obviously, but local politics are what matter the most, really. And so we've got a pretty good situation going down here in the southwestern part of the state. Just I wish we could sell Portland to like the state of Washington. Canada would probably be more fitting, but
yeah,
anyway.
No doubt. So what drove you to join the military?
And boredom mostly. I mean, it was kind of something I always wanted to do. When I was a kid, I watched when I was young, like 6th grade or something, those Surviving the Cut episodes came out on Discovery Channel, and they had like one on Rangers, one on snipers, one on Navy SEALs or whatever. And I really liked the one on Rangers and snipers. So that was kind of what I wanted to do. I either wanted to become a Ranger or a sniper, and graduated high school in Oregon, was going to like community college, didn't really have a lot of direction, didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. So it's like, well, let's kill some time in the military. But I, even then, didn't want to dive in head first. So I was like, let's just do the National Guard. That sounds fine. And then got out of basic training in the National Guard, pretty much immediately deployed to Afghanistan. And then came back from that. The terrorist attack happened, and then I was able to do a lot of cool stuff in the military for only being in 5 years. I did air assault school, basic leadership course, and sniper school, which was kind of finally checked the box of the reason I joined. And I remember,
what was your job in the Army?
I was just infantry,
Nice.
11 Bravo. But I told my recruiter that I wanted to be a sniper when I joined, and instead of like lying to me like most recruiters do, who's like, oh, I don't know, it's pretty difficult, I don't know if you'll be able to do it. And I was into long range shooting even before I got into the military. So actually having that background really helped. And so it really wasn't the hardest thing in the world, but it was the only thing that I did in my entire military career that actually lived up to expectations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a lot of that.
Yeah. You get to basic and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
not exactly what you're expecting,
No.
maybe. Yeah. How did training go for you coming, from Oregon and then basic training and your follow on training?
Well, I mean, basic training, yeah, was kind of a letdown. Like you said, you're just like, you're here with a bunch of, idiots. And you're like, I thought this was going to be cool. I thought we are going to be doing all this, like, interesting stuff. And, it's, walk, run. I forget what even the first step is, but you know what I'm talking about. You slowly build up to everything in the military so you don't screw it up. And, I was just hoping to get there and immediately start running. And that's not how the military operates. So, yeah, there was that. And then, again, the deployment to Afghanistan, which was fine, but just pretty boring because we were just doing like base security at Bagram.
What year was that?
14, 15.
Okay. We were probably there at the same time. Like when were you there in 14?
Would have been good question.
I'm terrible with dates too.
Yeah, I think it was like spring of 14 we got there, and then we were gone by like July of 15 or something like that. It was like a 9-month deployment, so whatever the math is on that,
Yeah.
that's not 100%
We
correct, but
definitely overlapped.
yeah.
At the
Anyway,
same time. That's
it
pretty
was
wild.
it was a good time though. We were right across from the Dragon DFAC at a little separate base, but yeah, that was pretty boring overall. But I did some sniper training up in the like Fob Scorpion, I think, which is outside of Kabul somewhere, I guess. I don't even remember, but that was actually pretty fun. But the rest of it was pretty boring. Then the terrorist attack happened, which was fun. And then I pretty much after that, the next summer went through like all my Army schools in one summer of 2016, BLC, which was terrible, super boring. And then I did air assault school, which was like, I didn't really care to be there. And it was, a lot of memorization and stuff that kind of like went over my head. I still passed somehow. I think some of the instructors were like kind to me because, I think they maybe knew that I'd stopped a terrorist attack the year before and it would probably look good on the Army to let me pass, but I passed somehow one way or the other, whether they knew about it or not. And then sniper school was just a great experience because I went there with a guy from my sniper section who was really cool. Zomer Dyke, actually, I think he's still might be a National Guard recruiter in Medford. So if you're thinking about joining and you're in Medford, go talk to him. But we went through sniper school together and he was a great guy. And that was, again, the only thing that really lived up to expectations. We actually learned a lot. It was kind of a gentleman's school, so to speak. So they really just cared about teaching you the material. We got the stalking phase, the shooting phase, and everything was just a blast. And the only problem was it's in Arkansas. We need to move that school out here to Oregon or somewhere on the western side of the country because Arkansas is hot and terrible and mosquitoes and ants and everything.
I haven't spent much time out there, but
when you're crawling around in the ground, it gives you appreciation for like the kind of climate the state has. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you're outside 24/7, Arkansas might not be a bad place to live if you can be in the air conditioning all summer, but when you're actually living in it, it's terrible.
Dude, how was how tough was sniper school? I've heard it's one of the most difficult follow-on schools you can have.
I mean, again, I was really like overly prepared for it. So I learned a lot about stalking in particular, but on the shooting side, I pretty much knew most of it already. The practical application was, of course, a little bit different. I think we lost maybe 40% of the class, so 60% pass rate. So more difficult than most Army schools for sure, but not like insane or anything. It's not like buds for the Navy SEAL or selection for Special Forces. And, it was just most of the guys that failed on like, one thing, whether they couldn't group on day one, that's like the first test. And then I think the next test before you go to phase 2, which is the stalking phase, is, I think unknown distance qual, where you and your spotter have to like, rapidly range, estimate a target, shoot it and get a hit on it with, X amount of rounds in a certain amount of time. So that is a little difficult, and it was pretty stressful. I kept giving Zomer Dyke the wrong wind call on one of our unknown distance calls, so I think we actually barely passed because I'm not the best spotter, to be totally honest. And so we passed that, and that's once you pass that phase, you're pretty much going to pass the school. Usually, I don't think we maybe had like one guy fail after that for something random. But after that, you go into the stocking phase. So you actually get your ghillie suit after you pass that, because the ghillie suits that they give you, you don't really build your own from scratch anymore. They give you like a tactical concealment one, at least when I was in, and you build it up, and they're pretty expensive, so they don't want to give them out to everybody. So they wait until that phase is done, and then you go into stocking, and that's super fun.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know if this is true or if it's like an urban legend, but I've heard people say that a lot of experience shooting before you go to sniper school can actually hurt you because
if
they're
you're
trying to.
if you're a bad shot.
Okay, so that's not true.
I mean, again, it's just, if you're a bad shot, it probably does hurt you, but if you're a good shot, it helps you.
They just make you better, kind of thing.
I mean, when it comes to shooting itself, I didn't really learn anything new. I learned, again, a lot about the practical application, and just, again, getting the repetition in does help quite a bit. But like, it's just, fundamentals, breathing, trigger control, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, we shot, I don't remember what the round count was, but we shot, thousands of rounds of 308 and, probably at least 8,300 Win Mag over the course of a sniper school. And again, that's all bolt action or slow semi-auto. Each round is, planned. So it's a lot of rounds when you're only shooting like, a handful a day. So you just get a lot of reps in, which is honestly, I think, the best part about it.
Dude, that's so nice anytime you're shooting on Uncle Sam's dime.
Yeah, exactly. And it's quality ammo too. The 2010s had just come out, the 300 Win Mags. So we had like, pretty brand new guns, good quality scopes, like everything was fantastic. Great instructors too. Got to give a shout out to the Arkansas Sniper School, because there's two. I think regular Army runs one out of Benning, if I'm not mistaken. But the National Guard run school, the sniper instructors were fantastic, because a lot of them had been doing it for like 10 years. So they were really like ingrained. A lot of them shot competition outside of it. So they were teaching you kind of like the latest stuff. I do like pistol competitions now. And one of the first places I learned how to shoot pistol really well was sniper school. Just great guys.
Nice. How'd your parents feel about you joining the military? And like, this is all post 9/11. So when you joined, you knew you were likely going to combat.
It was really post 9/11. I don't think I joined until 2012.
just a baby.
Yeah. So I think my parents were probably happy I was going. I was just kind of dicking around in community college. Didn't really know what direction I wanted to go in life. And so it was good for me. And, I'm really glad for the opportunity, but I think I'm sure they were a little bit nervous, especially once I deployed to Afghanistan. But again, the Afghanistan deployment was really low key. So yeah. We got a lot in common with that too. I did like 2 years of community college before I left, before I enlisted. And my parents were so happy to kick me out the door. And this is boring. Flying an A-10 would be way more fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people need that, like a kick in the ass that the military can give you. Just like,
and honestly, just time too. I mean, a lot of kids getting out of high school or even college don't really know what they want to do. And I always tell younger kids, it's like, if you don't know what you want to do yet, just start doing something and you'll figure it out along the way. And that's really kind of what happened over the course of my military career. Just doing different things and trying different things, and you'll figure it out one way or the other.
Yeah, it's nice to get some wins too. You're like,
exactly.
You have these goals, you have all the tasks required to achieve them, and you can just clearly see what's required. Start knocking out those tasks and getting all those merit badges. All the schools you wanted to do, the deployments, things like that. And
having a military on the resume, at least means you're not a quitter, which is good for employment. And a lot of people don't have the heart nor the gumption to finish something like that. Most people nowadays are pretty soft. And so if you hire a military veteran, hopefully it means they're at least like a normal person that can succeed and not fail whatever task you give them. That's as basic as, whatever you're doing in a day job.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I remember my parents were not all that worried either. They're just like,
thank God.
This is good for you. Yeah, go have fun. You'll be fine. We do it.
Blowing stuff up, that sounds like him. Good.
All right. Well, that's cool, man. So, Guess we'll start talking about your European vacation now.
Yes.
So was this during R&R on your first deployment, or was it after the
It
deployment?
was after the deployment. I think we didn't get like R&R middle deployment or whatever. They like made it short enough or whatever. But so I was when I was in Afghanistan, I was talking to Spencer, my childhood friend from Sacramento, who I used to get in trouble with. And so basically, I wanted to do a European vacation after the deployment. You know, as like a reward to myself, I guess, because I'd always kind of really liked Germany and always wanted to go there and stuff like that. So I wanted to do that. Spencer was in the Air Force stationed in the Azores, and he was, I mean, it's Portugal, but it's not really Europe. You know, it's like in the middle of the Atlantic. And I didn't really know that at the time. I was like, oh, you're stationed in Portugal? Okay, cool. You're already in Europe. I want to do this European vacation. Like, let's plan something and meet up. So I, asked my younger brother to do it with me. I asked a couple of friends in the National Guard to do it with me. They all regret that now, but no one wanted to go with me. Basically, it didn't work out. And so Spencer invited Anthony, our other friend that we'd known from that same like private school that we grew up with in Sacramento. And so he kind of flew out there. I met, again, I was home for maybe a month after the deployment, then went to Europe and met with this German girl that I'd been talking to. And so I hung out with her for maybe like a week or 10 days. Anthony and Spencer were doing like the stereotypical, like, Euro trip with backpacks, Italy, Germany. They'd actually passed through Germany while I was there. And they were like, oh, we're in Berlin right now. And I'm like, okay, cool. I can come meet you. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to be in Amsterdam tomorrow. Just get a bus and meet us in Amsterdam. So I go get the bus, meet them in Amsterdam. And it was just a trip because this was the first time like all three of us had hung out since we were like middle schoolers. Spencer was, my neighbor, but even, between college and the military, we hadn't seen each other in like probably 2-3 years. So we really weren't super close then. And then Anthony, I hadn't seen him in probably like 7 or 8 years since we were in middle school or whatever. So it was just weird that all three of us were back together again, like middle school friendships, and we're in Amsterdam, of all places. So we had some fun in Amsterdam. I can't talk about that, but we were like, oh, there's a lot of kind of circumstances that put us in that position to be on the train that day. And the first one was that we were having so much fun in Amsterdam, we debated staying longer, but we had already bought our tickets to go to Paris, and we were cheapskates and didn't want to buy extra train tickets, which weren't even that expensive, but again. And so we're like, okay, well, we'll stick to the original date. We'll go to Paris. We go to the train car. And when we get there to the train station, this elderly British guy needed help getting on the train. And so his daughter asked us to help him. So we carried his bags on. We kind of got on the train in the middle of the train. We didn't really know where our seats were even supposed to be. We just had like train tickets. I think they were for first class, but we didn't know where first class was on a train. And so we just kind of sat down, and we're just happy, content being there in the middle of the train. And then, train picks up, starts moving. We realize the Wi-Fi doesn't work. So we sent Spencer up to find the Wi-Fi, and he's like, oh yeah, I found first class. It's up at the front of the train, and the Wi-Fi works up there. So we're like, okay, cool. So we all moved up to first class. Another weird circumstance was, I took the window seat because I wanted to see all the scenery going by, and Spencer took the aisle seat because he's kind of tall and wants to like spread out, and Anthony was across from him on like a single seat. And so we kind of just settled in. I was like texting friends back home on the Wi-Fi. Spencer and Anthony had some like wine and went to sleep. Spencer put on like even like noise canceling headphones and went to sleep for like an hour or two. And then maybe 2 hours go by. And again, I'm really interested in like history and the scenery and all that. So I'm like watching our progress on the map, and we had like just crossed the border from Belgium into France. And I heard like a gunshot and breaking glass come from behind us. And I was like, huh, that's weird. And I kind of put my head up, and I couldn't really like place the noise. It sounded like, it didn't sound like a gunshot at the time. It sounded like, so maybe someone dropped a piece of luggage and broke a window or something. It was just very unusual. But I didn't think it was a gunshot. And so I put my head up. I'm like, oh, what's that? And then a train employee comes running away from the noise at a full sprint, like a full sprint. And we're at the front of the train, so there's no place really for him to run. So I'm like, that's unusual. So I look back to see what he's running away from, and there's a shirtless guy with an AK-47. And I'm like, well, that's a dead giveaway. And, my heart like immediately like stopped and just like sank and just kind of disbelief. And you're just like, there's no way, it's like, this is not happening, but it is.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't even know how to describe it, but yeah, just like your heart just sinks so fast and you just get this instant hit of adrenaline.
And of course you're unarmed.
Yeah.
In Europe.
Unarmed in Europe. If I had a carry gun, it was a SIG 938 at the time, so it probably wouldn't have helped much anyway, but it would have been a hell of a lot better than being unarmed. But to back up a little bit, actually, before that happens, unbeknownst to us, what had happened was the terrorist got on the train. We stopped in Brussels for a few minutes to like change train crew. And he got on the train with a backpack full of weapons and whatnot. And he went to the bathroom for about 20 minutes and was like, I guess, loading the weapons and watching a jihadist video on his phone. I think it was actually like only the second ISIS terrorist attack in Europe. So ISIS was just kind of coming into being. And anyway, watched a jihadist video on his phone. He was in there for so long that when he came out, there was 2 passengers waiting to use the restroom. A French guy named Damien and a French American but living in Paris named Mark. And so when he comes out of the restroom, he's got the AK-47 like locked and loaded, good to go. And Damien immediately, standing right there waiting to use the restroom. It's like, why is this guy taking so long? Then he comes out with an AK and Damien immediately grabs him by the neck with the AK kind of pinned between their bodies. And Mark, the other guy, tries grabbing the AK-47 from between the two of them. And pretty much what ends up happening is Mark gets the AK-47, starts running to the front of the train car. And then the terrorist pulls out a handgun from his waistband. And then Damien sees that and takes off. The French train employee that, actually, this is a funny story. The reason that Mark was able to get the AK-47 and that Damien wasn't within arm's reach to stop him from drawing the handgun was because a train employee broke them up thinking it was a regular fight.
Oh my God.
So that was when Mark got the AK-47. Damien got broken up and ran to the back of the train. Terrorist then pulls out the handgun, shoots Mark in the neck as he's running away from him towards us. And that gunshot was the breaking glass and gunshot that we heard. The bullet had actually exited Mark and flown kind of above our heads and hit a, little glass, like a emergency fire breaker thing. Anyway, so that's kind of what led up to that. And so we turn around and see the terrorist picking his AK-47 back up off of basically Mark's body. And, I immediately see that, heart sinks, think there's no way this is happening. I duck behind the seat. Spencer, to his credit, like wakes up from a nap with noise canceling headphones from like the train employee running by him. He like looks over at me. I'm like ducked behind the seat with like fear in my eyes. And Spencer turns around, sees what I see, ducks behind the seat next to me. And I'm like, I just hit Spencer on the shoulder. I'm like, let's go, or go get him, or something like that. Like, and to be fair, he's on the aisle seat, which we now refer to as the combat seat. So I couldn't do anything until he moved, or at least that's what I tell myself. And so, we duck, see him. I hit him on the shoulder. I'm like, let's go. Immediately, Spencer runs at the guy. And I'm thinking, it was probably like, it wasn't crazy. It was probably like 12, 15 feet away. But like, I'm like, let's go. Takes off out. I was like, maybe in a minute when he gets a little closer, maybe after he kills a few people, has to reload. Like, let's hop out and jump him, not like run straight at him. But I was like, ducking between the seats, like looking in these little between the cracks in the two seats. And not to mention I had tunnel vision from the adrenaline. Like I said, I've got tons of excuses, but I hit Spencer on the shoulder and I'm looking at the terrace. I don't even realize Spencer left until I see him cross my line of vision and he's almost to the terrorist. So I'm like, oh shoot, I guess we're going. So I get up and follow him. And basically by the time I get there, Spencer had tackled the terrorist and they were on the ground fighting over the AK-47. I pick the AK-47 up off the ground. Spencer works the terrorist kind of into a chokehold with his kind of back against the seats. And basically, I pick up the AK-47. I try to shoot the terrorist in like the stomach with it, which is a good thing I didn't because Spencer was behind him choking him, and it was, you know, full metal jacket, 7.62, 39 at point blank. Probably would have went right through him and into Spencer, but you know, at the time we were fighting for our lives. Okay,
No doubt.
and so the AK-47 doesn't fire because it's on safety. And before I can, you know, take it off safety and cycle it, the terrorist pulls out the handgun again, and he's trying to line it up with Spencer's head. And so I'm like, oh shoot! So I drop the AK-47 and I jump on the handgun and I pry it out of his hands. I hit him in the face a few times with it, and then Spencer is like, he's got a knife, get him off me. And the terrorist had pulled out like one of those extendable, breakable 6-inch box cutters and was just like slicing Spencer on the back of his neck. And so Spencer kicked him off of him. At that point, like Anthony had joined us. So it was like all three of us were kind of like around the terrorist trying to like not get cut, get control of the box cutter and punching him, kicking him, doing whatever we could do. So then finally, I don't even remember how it happened, but we got the box cutter away from him. And we had kind of like had him bent over a table that was on the train. And he's like filling around trying to get out. And I saw the handgun. So I put the handgun to the back of his head and I'm like, stop resisting, stop resisting. It was like a Browning high power copy made by FN. So the hammer was back. It was on safety. So I took it off safety, pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. And so I'm like, shoot, malfunction. So I go to rack the slide. I rack the slide. I realize there's no magazine in it. Because what had happened was in the original scuffle with Mark and Damien, he pulled the gun out of his waistband, gripped it too high, accidentally dropped the magazine, shot the one round in the chamber, hitting Mark in the neck, and the gun doesn't slide lock because there's no magazine. And so the hammer was still back and it had somehow ended up on safety. So I was assuming it was loaded, but it wasn't. I realized that. I pull the trigger again just for the hell of it, and then chuck it. You know, we're getting pretty frustrated at this point. So Spencer puts him in another chokehold. I go grab the AK-47 back up off the floor, and I just kind of start hitting the terrorist in the head with the muzzle of the AK-47. And I'm kind of, you know, trying to, it was like a slant break Draco AK-47, so it's kind of pointy on the muzzle brake. So I'm trying to hit him in the temple. And so hit him a few times with that. And then finally he kind of stops fighting back as much. And I basically just watch him go unconscious from Spencer's chokehold. And anyway, he finally goes unconscious. Spencer's still choking him because he frankly wants to kill him. He's pretty upset about the whole situation. And so then a train employee comes up and like kind of slaps the terrorist on the face and is trying to show Spencer that he's unconscious and he can stop choking him. And we basically politely told that guy to go to hell, more or less. And then I look up and I see a guy, Mark, trying to stand up in the aisle with blood squirting out of his neck, like squirting across the aisle. And so once again, being the good friend that I am, I'm like, Spencer, go get that guy. Because to be fair, Spencer was an EMT in the Air Force, and so that was kind of his lane, so to speak. So Spencer throws the terrorist on the ground, crawls over to Mark, who I guess his carotid artery had gotten severed by that 9mm, and so he was losing a ridiculous amount of blood. Spencer pinched the artery closed. I kind of took the terrorist, put his arms behind his back. A British guy offered to help us. And he, you know, I just told him, you know, hey, watch this guy, make sure he doesn't wake up. If he does, stand on his neck until he goes unconscious. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it was terrible advice. But so I took the AK-47 because I was infantry. First priority of work is security. So I'm like, okay, let me go check to make sure there's no other wounded passengers, because I don't know how many guys this guy killed before he got to our train car, and no other terrorists, which was more of a theoretical, but also I didn't want to leave a loaded AK-47 with a bunch of like French people. So I took the AK-47. I take it off safety because I'm thinking it's not loaded because no one got shot with it to my knowledge. So I take it off safety and I go to cycle it to load one. Well, of course, a round ejects from the chamber and lands on the seat next to me. And I'm like, that's weird. It's loaded. And not only that, but it looks like there's a dent in the back of the primer. And so I pick up the round off the seat, and sure enough, there was a dent in the back of the primer. And so, the terrorist had tried to shoot someone at some point, and the round just didn't go off. And come to find out, there was actually 2 rounds like that. So I think he had probably initially tried to shoot either Mark or Damien with the AK-47, had a malfunction, cycled it, and then probably tried to shoot Spencer again when he was running at him and had another malfunction. Luckily, he had terrible ammunition. It was like all corroded and mismatched. And anyway, the rest of his ammo was actually good. He had like 8 magazines, but the one that he had in the gun was actually the worst ammunition. So we got really lucky there as well.
Wow.
But anyway, so that was kind of a surprise that he had actually tried to shoot someone. So I made some comment to either Anthony or the British guy, Chris was his name, and about how lucky we got. I went and checked the rest of the train, and it was like empty for like 3 or 4 cars, and then everyone was kind of packed like sardines in the back of the train. And
is the train moving this whole time?
It actually came to a stop because someone hit like the emergency, whatever. So it stopped for like 2 minutes in the middle of like the Belgian or French countryside, and a couple people hopped off, and then they realized what was going on, and they hightailed it to Arras. And so I went to the back of the train where everyone was, and I was just like, hey, is anyone else hurt? And they're like, no. And so I'm like, okay. So I went back to the front of the train. At that point, Chris, the British guy, had actually hogtied the terrorist with neckties. I don't know where he learned that, but good for him. More power to you. And so I unloaded the AK-47. I started looking for the handgun. And there's actually a video that Anthony took on YouTube of like this part where we're all like looking for the handgun. It's like the immediate aftermath of the terrorist attack, and it's actually really interesting. But we're looking for the handgun. I'm basically trying to gather up all the weapons and ammunition, and that's kind of the first time I looked in his backpack and realized he had like 8 magazines with him. So he was obviously planning something. And so I just wanted to put everything kind of like by the door of the train so that when police came on board, they realized the situation was resolved. And then I went over to look at Mark and help Spencer with Mark's medical care. And to be honest, like the guy had lost so much blood. I was like, there's no way this guy's going to make it. I mean, he was in like, short industrial carpet, and that carpet was soaked for like twice the size of his torso in just blood. And I did like a blood sweep on him because he kept saying his back was hurting. So I cut his t-shirt off of him using the terrorist box cutter, actually. Looked for any other injuries. And Spencer was holding his carotid artery shut. And I can't remember if he was wearing a scarf or if like the shirt had just bunched up around his neck, but I didn't find the entrance hole of the gunshot wound because it was like way up high by his like neck where his shoulder meets his neck. And the bullet kind of like bounced down into his lung and then came back up sort of through his carotid and exited there. And that's what Spencer was holding on to, but I never found the entrance wound. And I was just like, no, he's good. And, obviously lost a lot of blood. And then we pretty much just kind of handled the situation like that. I mean, we were on the train for about 20 minutes just on our own until we got to the train station in Arras, and we were just, keeping Mark alive, doing all the other things we were doing. So we just rolled into the train station in Arras. There was tons of police and EMTs. I think the train driver had already radioed ahead that the situation was resolved because they came on board. They were fairly casual considering. And, a bunch of EMTs ran over to Spencer. They did like a medical changeover with Mark. Anthony and I realized it was getting really crowded in there. So like he and I kind of jumped off the train the first chance we got. And like a break from all the police and EMTs coming on board. And we talked to a French detective who just told us to sit down and wait for him. And then basically, that was just about it. We went to Anthony, myself, and Chris, the British guy, went to the police station to kind of get questioned and give our statements. Spencer, Mark, and the terrorist, I guess, went to the hospital. Well, I guess terrorist probably went to jail, but anyway, he got taken care of for his injuries. We went to the police station. Chris he had a cell phone that was international, so he was like, "Hey, is there anyone you guys want to call?" And I'm like, "You sure, man? Like, that's probably an expensive call. Like, I'm just." I really wasn't like, weighing the gravity of the situation yet. We were all,
had to be surreal.
well, it was very surreal. And even while it was happening, like you can watch the video that Anthony took, like we were cracking jokes like the whole time and just like Spencer was really pissed off, which I don't blame him, but like Anthony and I were like way too casual for the situation. And, making jokes and stuff. And it just didn't really, the gravity of the situation didn't really set in until like probably a couple days later. But anyway, we borrow his phone. I call my mom and she didn't pick up. So I called my younger brother and I was like, "Hey, we were just like in a terrorist attack. You might want to tell Mom and Joyce," which is Spencer's mom. And apparently my mom was next door at Joyce's house. And my brother said, "Okay," and then rolled over and went back to sleep. So
thanks, bro.
They didn't find out till like another 15 or 20 minutes later, till my mom came home. And then after that, like I said, we gave our statements to the police a couple times. I initially didn't tell the French police that I'd tried to shoot the terrorist in the back of the head with the handgun because I wasn't sure on their self-defense laws. Then the FBI told me that they probably didn't care because it was a terrorist attack. And so I was like, okay. And then got a phone call from Obama, which was interesting. Spencer joined us like 24 hours later after that. And they said, "Hey, we're going to go all the way to Paris and we're going to, they want to give you guys an award like the Elysee. We're going to put you guys at the embassy, the American embassy in Paris," which is really neat. And so we all kind of, met back up with Spencer, which was the first time we'd seen him in 24 hours. So we obviously had a lot to talk about the whole drive. Spencer's sister happened to be in Denmark for her work. And so she came down and was there pretty much within 24 hours. So we all kind of took this police convoy to Paris, which was super fun. Got to the embassy. The embassy staff was amazing. They put us in like the best rooms in the American embassy. I slept in the bed that Charles Lindbergh slept in after he flew across the Atlantic, which was all really cool too. A lot of great, interesting things happened to us post-terrorist attack. That would take all day, but then we got the Legion of Honor, which is like the highest award they can give in France, I guess. We got that from the French president at the time.
Did that happen like during that trip, or did you guys all come back for it?
No, that was like 48 hours later.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was like pretty immediate.
Just a whirlwind, I bet, after that.
Oh yeah, no, it was nuts. And I didn't get sleep at all the first night because the terrorist attack happened at like 5:30 or 6:30 p.m. And then I was up all that night just from the adrenaline. I mean, it was the most ridiculous adrenaline dump ever. I definitely see how people can get addicted to it, but it was nuts. So I didn't sleep at all. So we were just like running off fumes the next day. And then actually it was really cool. Columbia Sporting Goods. So what was he? Someone at the battalion level in my infantry unit happened to work for Nike. And he basically was like, "Hey, Nike, is there any way we could borrow a jet to like fly their family out?" And Nike was basically, I don't know, they said no for whatever reason. It was like a conflict of interest because he was also an employee. I don't remember what the reason was, but he also happened to be friends with one of the pilots for the Boyle family who owns Columbia. And so he asked his pilot friend to run it up the chain, and they're like, "Sure." And so basically all of our family just had to make their way to Portland. And then the Columbia family, the Boyle family, again, basically no notice. We're talking like 6 hours notice, gave their jet and flew all of our family from Portland to Paris. And they made it literally like an hour and a half before the award ceremony for the Legion of Honor. So they were there like within 36 hours of the actual terrorist attack. And so thanks to the Boyle family for that. And so that was really cool. And yeah, we did the whole ceremony. Spencer had to go to Longstuhl, Germany for some follow-up medical stuff. So I went with him, and basically the Air Force didn't like my mom and I being there for whatever reason. So we're just like, okay, fine, we'll go home. And so I flew back to New York, and that was kind of where like the whole aftermath started, I guess.
Wow. Hey, that's so heavy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So what's crazy about it is, I think every guy, when they hear of a situation like that, like that's how they hope they would respond. But to actually do it when like bullets are flying, that's a whole nother thing entirely.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
you guys just did it.
We had joked about that kind of thing when we were like younger, you know, like, oh, we would beat the shit out of the guy, whatever. And you know, you don't really know how you're going to react until something like that happens. But I think the fact that we had all known each other, you know, since I've known Spencer since I was like 5 years old, right? So we had kind of we were on the same page without even talking, and we kind of knew what the plan was without even talking. And I think that went into it quite a bit. If I was alone on the train that day, I don't know if we would have had the same reaction. There's a lot of
What
things.
ifs, yeah.
A lot of what ifs, but you know,
And I can't help but think what would have happened if you guys weren't there, because you said he had a whole backpack full of magazines and
well, if you ever got the AK-47 working, it probably would have been really bad, because it was a great plan when you think about it. Kill a few people in first class, which is the front of the train. Then you have a narrow tube full of people, and you just work your way down that tube. You don't have to worry about anyone coming from behind you or the sides. You just basically shoot down.
No
the
one's
train.
armed.
Yeah, no one's armed. So it was a great plan. We found out later over the course of the trial that allegedly he was supposed to have another terrorist with him, and if there's two of them, that would have made the situation way more complicated, and it probably wouldn't have worked out well for us. So again, a million things went into how lucky we got. You know, the weapon malfunctioning, the magazine or the handgun not working. I mean, like, so many little things. Even Spencer, like, his neck wound was like only about an inch and a half from his carotid artery. And if his carotid artery got severed, Mark for sure would have died, because I would have tried to help Spencer. And I don't know if I would have had the medical training to save Spencer either. So, I mean, a million things could have gone differently. And someone was watching out for us that day, because you just don't get that lucky.
Was Spencer like a BJJ guy too?
Yeah, he did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Portugal quite a bit. I don't know how good he was, but he was good enough.
Knew a rear naked choke.
So that's about all you need in that circumstance. So yeah, no, he did great. And you know, it's kind of you know, talking about how lucky we got and how everything kind of worked out for us. It was like we were training our whole lives for that moment without even knowing it. You know, Spencer was an EMT, which saved Mark's life. He knew Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which was how he was able to get that choke in finally and choke the terrorist out. I was infantry. I had just bought an AK-47 for the first time coming back from Afghanistan. I went on like a little gun buying spree, and luckily an AK-47 was one of them, so I knew how they worked. You know, everything just worked out. Everything.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. Like, I'm just so glad you guys were there and ready to step up. Like, it's really an unbelievable story. I'm sure it might even be still a little bit surreal for you that happened.
Oh, it is. I mean, it's almost like I realize that it happened, but it doesn't feel like it really happened to me. You know what I mean? And, and the really depressing thing was, you know, this was the ISIS terrorist cell in Brussels, which also went on to do the Brussels airport bombing, I think, and the Bataclan shooting. The Bataclan shooting killed like 120 people. And so, you know, it's depressing to think about how well ours went compared to how terrible other terrorist attacks went from the same terror cell. You know what I mean? And not only that, but it would have been terrible for our families. You know, I mean, I come back from Afghanistan and then get killed on vacation in Paris or, you know, France. It just, you know, it would have been an incredibly shitty situation.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just, I don't know why we got so lucky and all those people at the Bataclan didn't. There's just a lot of things. You just never know what God's plan is. You never know how things are going to work out. You never know how lucky you're going to get or not lucky. So I just try to stay prepared. And I always tell people, you never know what's going to happen. And so you can't really be prepared for everything. But even just talking about what you would do in a situation, I think helps, because that's kind of, I think, why we were on the same page. We'd known each other for so long, but even just talking through what you're going to do in a situation like that, even if it's not like a set plan, even if it's all theoretical, you at least know, like, hey, this happened, so this is probably going to happen. Or, oh, I don't have phone contact with my friend or my wife or my family, but I know that we talked about this one time and they should be doing this right now, or whatever. Carry a tourniquet in your car, carry some quick clot. Like, you never know what you're going to run into.
Yeah. Any issues like after the fact dealing with that? Like for you guys, any PTSD type stuff, or are you able to just kind of move on from it?
Not really. I mean, they say the best thing for PTSD is to be busy after the event and basically forget about it, more or less. I mean, we haven't really been able to forget about it because we talked about it probably every day for the first 2 years.
Yeah.
But we were definitely very busy afterwards. And to be honest, it was mostly a positive experience in our lives. I mean, Mark, the guy who got shot in the neck, ended up surviving despite a tremendous amount of blood loss. Only good things came out of it. It was a traumatic experience. Like, I have like weird nightmares sometimes that kind of came from it, but nothing that's, bad PTSD or anything like that. So I really have nothing but good things to say about the terrorist and everything involved. So
had you even heard about ISIS at that point?
We did. We knew they were in Iraq because I think we were pulling out of Iraq at the time, and there was talk of ISIS trying to come into Afghanistan while we were deployed there. So I knew what they were, but they were not like a real serious entity at that point. Like I said, it was only like maybe the second terrorist attack in Europe that was done by ISIS. And again, like that year and the year after, I mean, they were just going gangbusters. So, yeah.
Any issues with like your personal security? Like, because now you're this, like, it was blasted everywhere, all over the international media. Anything ever come of that? Like them trying to target you specifically?
Not really. Like, we heard kind of a weird rumor like that. But no. I mean, it made me a little bit more paranoid now.
Yeah,
not necessarily because of terrorism, but I'm just like, oh shit, this stuff actually does happen in real life. You can't say, oh, that would never happen anymore when it actually, something like that has happened to you, something statistically that's very rare. So like I said, carry guns, carry tourniquets, carry quick clot, know the basics of medical care. So yeah, just try to be a well-rounded individual, I guess, would be the only advice I could give.
No doubt, man. Are you pretty much armed whenever you can be now?
And if anything, I've gotten more cocky. So
Okay.
We did that unarmed. I don't need a gun, but I try to carry every time I can. Honestly, the biggest reason I don't is because I don't want to buy bigger pants and I'm kind of chubby. So putting it inside the waistband it's a little tight right now. I still carry, don't mean to stereotype, but if I go to Walmart, I carry. If I go certain places, I always carry. I usually have one in my vehicle or on my person. But I'm not like absolutely anal about it like I used to be, even though I probably should be. But anyway,
yeah, no, that's good. I think like too, what's interesting is the medical component, like knowing some basic, how to stop the bleed things is really important.
No, absolutely. Cause again, like I said, you never know when the guy in front of you at Walmart is going to have a heart attack. You never know when you're going to run up on a car accident and someone's going to be having blood loss. You just never know what's going to happen. And first aid is so much more applicable to everyday life than even carrying a gun. I believe in both, absolutely. But again, you're more likely to run into someone at Walmart having a heart attack than you are to run into a terrorist attack.
Right.
Yeah.
And then especially if you're, working on your property, chainsaws, heavy equipment, like that. Yeah. That medical piece. The guns are way more fun. Let's be honest. For sure. But I spend way more time training on firearms than I do on medical care.
I'm just saying, have the basics.
Right.
Have a tourniquet, have quick clot, know how to use it. You don't need to get into like, chest seals and complicated stuff, but at least the basics, for God's sakes.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, let's take a quick break there and
Yeah.
then we'll get into what happened next. Want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. I'm excited to tell you about Papa Bear Naturals. Papa Bear produces all natural, USA-made skincare products, including tallow balm, sunblock, deodorant, and other personal care items. One of the cool things about Papa Bear is that we here at Seven Barrel Ranch are one of their beef tallow suppliers. So when you buy from Papa Bear, you're supporting us and many other small ranchers as well. It's a great American company with great American products. So check them out at papabearnaturals.com and order today. I've got something special to share with anyone who wears socks. That's all of us, right? As a fellow sock enthusiast, I can tell you that Buffalo wool socks are my favorite socks of all time. They're comfortable, warm, breathable, and most importantly, they last. They're also a piece of American heritage, crafted from bison wool by a family dedicated to preserving the American Plains bison. They've been running bison for over 40 years. Each pair you purchase supports local ranchers and a great community. Visit buffalowoolsocks.com today and get yourself a pair. I want to take a moment to say thank you to each and every one of my Patreon supporters. Your support is what keeps the podcast going, and I couldn't do without you. Now, if you want your very own signed 30 millimeter casing, sign up for my Patreon, silver tier or above, and I will send you one. I've got a few more set aside for that purpose. All right, man. So we're back and just finished up the story of this insane terrorist attack, which you and your buddies thwarted, which was pretty insane. So what's your life look like after that? Does it kind of like immediately everything changes, or how does that unfold?
Pretty much immediately everything changed. I mean, I didn't really expect it. Like, I got home, I really only flew to New York. Basically, my parents agreed for me to do an interview in exchange for a flight. And so I flew back to New York. I forget what show I did. I did Greta Van Susteren on Fox News. I did Good Morning America, I think. And the casting director for Dancing with the Stars saw that episode and called me the same day. I'd only been in the United States for like 24 hours. And she called me and was like, "Hey, do you want to do the show Dancing with the Stars?" I'm like, "Okay, whatever." I'm like, "Yeah, right." And then she's like, "Oh, by the way, just, she could tell I was like going to hang up on her and was like, I'm good, whatever. But, send me an email." And she's like, "Oh, by the way, this is how much it pays." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Let me think on it."
On second thought.
And then, I was still kind of worried that it would be kind of corny. And she actually introduced me to a guy who did it the previous season named Noah Galloway, who was like a double amputee. Actually a really cool guy. And he, talked me into doing it basically and said, it's actually a really cool opportunity. And, it does pay well and, it's not as bad as you think. And so I'm like, okay. And so I did it and it was actually a ton of fun. Met a lot of great people. And bought my first house with it.
Nice.
And,
so how was your dancing? Did you get good at it?
I got third place actually, which was
impressive.
fantastic because I made the finale. And so, everyone on the show was super nice. It was not like your typical, I guess, experience of like, trying to make it in Los Angeles, which is where they filmed it. So I had to like live in LA for like 4 or 5 months. But it was a great experience, honestly. And, I had a lot of fun. The only weird thing that happened was, during the filming of that show was when the, shooting at Umpqua Community College happened, which was only like 6 weeks after the terrorist attack, which was really unusual. We survive a terrorist attack and then, like 10 people get killed at my community college. And then on top of that, it's even weirder. I go back home for like a week after the shooting at the college. And I was there for about a week. And while I'm there, I get a call from Spencer's older brother, and he calls me at like 5 a.m. And I'm not a morning person. His older brother's not a morning person. So I'm like, why is Everett calling me this early? And I answer the phone. And he's like, hey, man, don't freak out, but Spencer got stabbed last night, and he's in ICU in Sacramento. Apparently, Spencer, I think he even still had his like arm in a sling from his injuries on the train, but he was out drinking with some friends, and some Asian gang member like punched a girl that he was with, and so then he had to fight him over it. And it's actually like surveillance footage on YouTube somewhere of these 5 Asian dudes losing a 5-on-1 fight against Spencer.
Damn.
And so they're losing so bad that they pull knives and end up stabbing him a couple times. He got stabbed in like technically the heart. They nicked his heart, the lung, and the liver. And so he had, I don't remember if like single collapsed or double collapsed lungs, but I mean, like they declared it a homicide because they thought he was going to die. They had a detective riding in the ambulance with him, trying to get whatever information they could out of him before he died. But he ends up surviving, son of a bitch.
Damn.
And so again, this was all within like 6 or 7 weeks. Terrorist attack, shooting at the community college, Spencer getting stabbed again.
He needs to like move out to the country at this point.
Yeah, that's what I said. So we've had all this weird stuff happen on top of, all the crazy interviews we've done. We did like a parade in Sacramento on like the 9/11 anniversary, which again was only like 2 or 3 weeks after the terrorist attack, and had like a huge like 10,000 person parade there, which was really cool. And just did all sorts of crazy things. And we pretty much immediately got approached about doing a book as well. So we started working on the book, within like a couple months. And where it gets really fun is we were doing some weird event. I think the book had just come out or was coming out, and we got invited to do the Spike TV Guys Choice Awards, which I think was one of the last years they did it, because I don't even think they're around anymore. But we went to that, and they gave us some made-up award. And the only interesting thing, and the only reason they got us to go, was because they're like, hey, Clint Eastwood's going to be the one to give you guys the award. So we're like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. I'll get to meet Clint Eastwood, whatever. So we go there, get the award, and we're like talking to Olivia Munn, who's an actress, very attractive anyway. So we were talking to her after we got the award, and she's like, oh, I didn't know you were the guys, blah, blah, blah. And then so we're talking to her, and then some assistant comes up and is like, hey, Mr. Eastwood, who just gave you guys the award, would like to speak to you guys in the green room. And so we're like, Olivia Munn or Clint Eastwood? Needless to say, we chose Clint Eastwood.
Nice.
So we went and talked to Mr. Eastwood in the green room for a little bit, and we're just like, oh yeah, whatever, this is what we did. It was really cool. Kind of bullshitted with him about nothing for a minute. And, I was like, we just put out a book, you should do the movie on it. Ha ha ha. And he's like, oh, send me a copy. You never know. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever, thinking it was just joking around, because frankly, he probably was. But again, to his credit, Spencer, again, actually follows up, reaches out to his assistant, sends him a copy of the book, doesn't hear back. A couple weeks go by, so he sends him another email. And is like, hey, just wanted to let you know I sent you the copy of the book. Just wanted to see if Mr. Eastwood saw it, if he was theoretically interested. And again, this was right after the book came out. We had already actually been like shopping the story to a couple networks. We had an agent working on it and all that. And, a couple people were interested, but no one was like, hey, I want to do the movie 100%. So we were all kind of like, whatever on it. So anyway, 3 days after that second email, Spencer gets a phone call out of the blue from Mr. Eastwood and was like, hey, I read the book. Let's do it. And
wow.
Again, 3 days later. So he read the whole book in 3 days and decided he wanted to do the movie on it. And this was right after he came out with Sully, about Sully Sullenberger, who I think was a pilot. So you might have some crossover there. But he had done American Sniper and then Sully, and then he was going to do our movie. So he was kind of like on this role of doing real life documentary type movies. And so we're like, okay, cool. This is awesome. Clint Eastwood wants to do the movie. Duh, we're going to do it. So we started, the process of that, told the story a million different times into every like minute detail so they could get everything right for the movie. And they did a really good job of like cataloging everything. And, it felt like they were trying to get every detail right. And we had, a little bit of input in that process, which made us feel better about the movie being accurate. And then, so we'd, done quite a few trips down to Los Angeles to meet with the producers and Clint Eastwood about doing the movie. And about 10 days before they're supposed to start filming, they're like, hey, want to have you guys come down one more time? And we're like, okay, this is kind of weird. Like, they didn't tell us why. It's 10 days before the movie starts filming. I bet you it's because we're going to meet the actors that play us in the movie. And they're going to try to get a feel for who we are as people before they play us in the movie. So we're all kind of excited for it. So we go down. We're just sitting there kind of in Clint Eastwood's office. And we're just talking to him. And he's like talking about how he's got this little tiny Sony camera that's really high quality. And he wants to use that to film the train scenes because it's really tight confined, because he actually wanted to film it on a real moving train. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, I don't really care about that. Like,
Why are we here?
Yeah, we're like, why are we here? And he's like, so anyway, we want to maybe get you guys on a film later, just kind of see what you guys look like on film, do a little screen test. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell that means, but okay. He's like, because, did some thinking, and I was just wondering how you guys would feel about doing it again. And we're like, yeah, we'll do the whole thing again and walk through what happened and show everyone how it went down exactly. He's like, no. Like, what do you mean about doing it yourselves? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, do you want to play yourself in the movie? And we're like, oh. And our initial instinct was obviously yes. But then, we thought about it and we're like, would it be better to actually have professional actors do this and, maybe do a more convincing job? But then we were like, A, it's not every day you get to play yourself in your own movie about yourself. And B, it's Clint Eastwood directing it and he's the one asking us. So we're going to say yes to Clint Eastwood. So we did. And that was another crazy thing. So it was 10 days before filming started. So we pretty much immediately had to gear up to play ourselves in the movie. So
Where did it film?
Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Europe on site. So
Wow.
I immediately stopped eating so I could lose some weight. I mean, you're playing yourself in a movie about yourself. Like, it's going to be the one thing that follows you throughout your whole life. You're going to show your grandkids this movie one day, So I was like, I want to get in really good shape. Spencer was the same way. They hired like a professional trainer, like for actors, how to lose weight quick. So we did, rigorous workouts, stopped eating, did one day shooting in Los Angeles. That's where we did like some of the Afghanistan scenes in the movie. Then we did 3 weeks in Atlanta, but we didn't do a whole lot there because that was mostly like the scenes of our childhood, which we had like, kid actors playing ourselves then. And, did a few scenes there that we could pass off as like Europe. And then we went from there and actually flew to Europe and did like, we called it like Paris week. We did a couple days in like Venice, did some filming there. And then we were in Paris for a week, and that was all the train scenes. We got an actual train, the same company of the train that we actually were on. And then we just drove from Paris to Amsterdam and back every day filming.
Wow.
On location on a real train. It was a really cool experience.
How long was the whole filming for the movie?
It honestly, I think it only took 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. And
Clint Eastwood, he's such a pro.
Yeah, he's known for coming in on schedule and under budget, which is why he pretty much gets whatever he wants, because even his own producers and the studio did not want him to use us as actors. But again, he pretty much gets whatever he wants. So yeah, we did it. It was a great experience. The best, and he is the best. He's a really cool guy. I've got a ton of great Clint Eastwood stories. And, I just don't think anyone else could have pulled it off as well as he did. And again, he stood up to the studios and wanted us to play ourselves in the movie. And if nothing else, it's a very accurate movie. I don't have to like revise anything and say like, oh, well, it's a good movie, but this happened when this didn't happen.
It's a great movie. We watched
yeah.
it and we really enjoyed it.
Acting's not the best, but it's again very accurate, and that's all we really
Dude,
cared
it's
about.
Clint Eastwood. Like
Yeah.
every movie he makes is entertaining, and it was great, dude. I think he did a great job.
Thank you. It was fun, and again, really, it was hard because I was only like, terrorist attack happened when I was 22. We were filming on the 2-year anniversary of the terrorist attack, and so it was like 2 years later. I was 24 years old, 23 years old, and I'm like, this is going to be the peak of my life. Like,
I'm 24.
I know nothing is ever going to get better than filming our own movie with Clint Eastwood in freaking Venice or whatever. Like it was.
That's pretty wild.
It was unreal. Yeah.
Yeah, that you came a long way from being an Oregon boy running around the woods,
Oh yeah.
and now you're doing movies with Clint Eastwood again.
I was saying, I'm pretty much just running around the woods now, so it comes full circle.
Back to what you were born to do.
I like it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So between Dancing with the Stars and the movie with Clint Eastwood, that took you about 2 years after the terrorist attack.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of downtime. Like the first 6 months after the terrorist attack was pretty much doing Dancing with the Stars. I also did the tour with them afterwards, which was actually pretty fun too. Then we did a little bit of stuff with the book, but that really wasn't time consuming. And that was also the summer. Like I wasn't even around. I think I was in sniper school when the book came out. So that was the summer that I did air assault school, basic leadership school, and sniper school. And so after that summer was when we just started talking about the movie, and then we started filming, I think sometime in like 17, and then it came out like early 2018.
So you're still serving in the Guard throughout all this time.
They were pretty flexible. I think they realized that it would be good for the Guard
Absolutely.
for me to be able to film a movie about some of my experiences in Afghanistan and the National Guard. So they were actually very flexible. And
dude, the Guard's great, man. Like, I've heard nothing but good things about it. You can do a lot of the things you can do on active duty, but you just have a little bit more control over your life, it seems.
Yeah, pretty much. And again, they were it's still, all the downsides are the same, where, you get like one bad person in a leadership position and like the next 3 ranks above you, and they can make your life hell. There was a little bit of that, but beyond that, it was a really good experience. And a lot more upside, I guess I would say, than active duty.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then when did you decide to start out in politics?
So politics was kind of weird. I got back from pretty much from the movie. This was actually pretty recently. I got back after filming the movie, and I'd always followed politics, but I wasn't really, political. I knew where I stood on issues, but I met my my state representative, actually, Dallas Hurd from SD1 of Oregon State Senate. At the time, I think he was in the House, but anyway, I met him by chance on a plane, and he recognized me and started talking to me. He said, "Oh, you should think about doing politics." And I'm like, I don't know about that. Sounds terrible. But to his credit, he didn't really give up, and he kept talking to me about issues. And the more I learned, the angrier I got, until I wanted to do something. Especially on the forestry issue. I'm sure you know about that. The federal forestry issue in Oregon is a mess. We have these huge forest fires, which are significantly contributed to by our lack of logging and forest management and thinning the forests on federal land in particular. And so it's not something that we can control locally. And so it made me want to do something on the federal level. So I decided to run for Congress in 2020, ran against a 36-year incumbent named Peter DeFazio. Unfortunately, came up just short, even though it was a swing district. It was a close race, but that much of an incumbency is hard to beat. And then we got redistricted in 2022, and so the district became a little bit more liberal, but that incumbent decided to retire. And so we did it again in 2022, and that was honestly just a waste because they just put so many Democrats in the district, it wasn't winnable anymore.
So is that, because that's my district now. And
yeah.
Is that pretty much the way they've carved it out, is that pretty much unwinnable for a Republican now?
Which is kind of a shame because it was I ran right before redistricting against that incumbent, and I think they saw how close I got and were like, oh, this actually might be a vulnerable district without that incumbent since he's going to retire. We should put more Democrats in it and reinforce it, and that's exactly what they did, unfortunately. And now it's like a D plus 4 or 5 on the Cook PVI, which it's political speak, but basically means it's like theoretically winnable, but not practically.
Would have to be like a
It would have to be one of the
wave.
best years for Republicans, and you'd probably need a lot of money. And getting both of those to line up is very hard.
Well, that's really interesting. Like, what kind of money does it take to run for Congress? Like, what's that look like?
It depends on the district. We actually set the record for the most expensive congressional race in Oregon's history in 2020. But that was a recipe because, I had stopped the terrorist attack pretty recently. And so that was a good story. So we raised a lot of small dollar money from people across the country who just thought it was a cool story and wanted me to win. And then the incumbent was a 36-year incumbent chairman of transportation and infrastructure. So he had a lot of money in DC. So I brought a bunch of small dollar donations from people across the country. I think we did about 5 million. And then he brought about 7 million from DC PACs and lobbyists. And I mean, it was plenty to win, but we did about as good as we could in the district. But politics is expensive, even running for Congress. I mean, we were one of the more expensive races, but it's usually at least probably $2 million if you expect to win against a Democrat anyway.
Do you think that just like looking at Oregon, so a lot of people look at these blue states and say, why are you still there? Why don't you go to a state that more aligns with your values, kind of reinforce the current red states? And, what do you think the future of politics in Oregon looks like?
Well, the problem with that theory is that the Democrats keep running us out of all the nice states. They took Colorado, they took California, they took Oregon, they took Washington, and now we have to live in, no disrespect, but like Tennessee or Idaho, like
this is my home.
Well, yeah, it's that, and it's also just a more scenic state. Like, we shouldn't give the Democrats every state on the West Coast. Like, let's pick one and flip it. Like, all the Republicans are moving to Idaho or, Florida. Florida used to be a swing state until 4 years ago, but so many people have fled these blue states and moved to Florida that it's now a safe Republican state, which is great. But why don't we do it the other way? Why don't we pick one Democrat state, get a bunch of Republicans to move there and flip it? Oregon only has 4 million people. We're only a D plus 6. We only need about 100,000 more Republicans in the state to make it a swing state. And don't get me wrong, that's hard to do. But in a population this low, it would not take a lot of people from Idaho or from Tennessee or from Texas or from Utah to decide to move to a nice West Coast state with a good climate. And we could flip it.
I like that plan. Let's flip Oregon and make it more livable.
And the crazy thing is, we're getting a lot of Republicans moving here from California, but we're losing Republicans in Oregon to Idaho and Tennessee and Florida just as quick. So if they had all stayed, Oregon actually would be a fairly competitive state by now. So, like I said, I just want to play offense. I'm tired of Republicans playing defense, even with our rights. Republicans always defend our right to own guns. They always defend our right to free speech. Sometimes not even that well, but instead of defending our rights, let's expand them. Let's give us more gun rights, which is, has been happening slowly in some states, but I'm talking federally. Repeal the NFA, do all these other good things. Give us more rights to free speech, not less. Don't just conserve and defend our rights. Let's expand them. So anyway, that's my broader worldview.
Absolutely, man. What's your take on the presidential race? You have any views on how you think it'll go?
Well, I just want to say that as someone who's been involved in politics for like 5 or 6 years, this has probably been the craziest month and a half in political news, probably almost in history. I mean,
it's got to be.
From the first debate to Joe Biden dropping out. I mean, you had the first debate that was basically stacked in Biden's favor. He still did so terribly that he then went through 3 weeks of his own Democrat press thinking that he needs to drop out, and people basically slowly ramping up this pressure campaign against him until he finally does drop out.
Trump like beat him too bad.
Exactly, which is an argument. I've heard that. But, then Trump gets almost assassinated. I mean, he literally came like an inch away from getting his head blown off on national TV in 4K. I mean, to think about how terribly that could have gone is insane. I mean, that could have sparked a civil war, for God's sakes.
Do you think that like just to pause on that point right there, like you're a trained sniper, like you work security at Bagram. Like, what do you make of that whole situation where they left that roof that was so close, unprotected? Like, do you think it was just like terrible negligence?
Yeah, that's an understatement. I mean, you think if you want to kill the president of the United States, that the most obvious way to do it would be crawl on top of the nearest roof and shoot him. That's the most obvious. Like, that is what.
How do you miss that?
Well, how do you miss that? But also, like, yeah, the Secret Service. I mean, every movie you watch, like that stupid movie Shooter, they're like, we're going to take this shot from like 4 miles away. We're going to have this robot do it. We're going to have to take into effect the Coriolis rotation of the earth and like all this crap. We're going to have like custom made bullets and a custom made gun. And the truth is, you just have to be some idiot who can
with a ladder
with a ladder and crawl on top of a freaking roof from 140 yards away or whatever it was. I mean, it's like our perception of how good the Secret Service is and the reality obviously does not line up. And, they've got a million different excuses as to what happened and why they weren't there. But like, it's such a catastrophic failure. Again, it's the most obvious position that you could have shot someone from, and they left it unguarded enough that people were seeing the guy before he shot. Cops even knew about him before he shot.
It's like, why did he even take the stage? I mean, there's so many questions.
I mean, there's so many questions. It's such a catastrophic failure. I mean, you think that Lee Harvey Oswald shooting JFK was better concealed and more well thought out than that. And that was on a moving parade route. I mean, this is the biggest failure in the Secret Service history. And obviously, a bigger failure would be, a president actually, like Reagan getting shot or JFK getting shot and killed. But when you think of how obvious and how easy this was to defend against, this is a much bigger failure than almost any assassination attempt. So
I think there's a lot of complacency, like you said. I mean, it's been a while. I don't know if it was like, there's a lot of theories, it's like just kind of planned complacency. Like, we're not too worried about it. We'll just see what happens. But I really hope there's just a full accounting of the situation from start to finish.
I think so too, but I've heard this talked about before, but it's, I think it's just kind of emblematic of like where our country is in this stage. We have a Secret Service, which is supposed to be top notch, and we have a woman running it who was never even a Secret Service agent. She never really, I don't think, had anything to do with the military or law enforcement.
It's like corporate security.
Yeah,
right?
She was like loss prevention at freaking Pepsi. Like, it's like she's the one running the Secret Service. They allegedly only had like 1 or 2 actual Secret Service agents on site. Everyone else was either local law enforcement or HSI. And so, you've got this huge bloated Secret Service that has a ton of funding and they're supposed to do all these cool things. And, they have the craziest, best limo. They fly the president around on Air Force One. They have all these assets, all the money in the world, the best sniper rifles to defend against, but then they're not intelligent enough to point their sniper rifles at the closest exposed roof to the president. They didn't have the forethought to secure that roof in one way or another. So it's deeper than complacency. I mean, it's absolute abject failure. And again, it's not just the Secret Service. You could talk about the Afghanistan withdrawal. You could talk about all sorts of different things.
Just rampant across the federal government.
Yeah.
It's like the competency crisis is real.
Yeah, and we need to start firing people. I mean, the fact that no one was fired for the Afghanistan withdrawal, the fact that it took this Secret Service lady 2 weeks before she resigned. I mean, there's so many. We just need to start firing people left and right.
Just clean house.
Clean house would be a word. Clean house, cut budgets, I mean, kill entire departments in the federal government. I mean, there's so much we need to do. We would need someone like Thomas Massey to be president if this country is even able to be saved at this point.
Dude, I think of how Stu Scheller, the lieutenant colonel who was the only officer held accountable for anything in the 20-year war of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And every general who went up there and lied in front of the American people, in front of Congress, about how great everything was going, and they just repeated it year after year after year until we just left in disgrace. And yeah, and the fact that no one was held accountable for that, except for the one Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, is just infuriating. I hope, again, I don't know how much hope I have that it will actually happen, but we definitely need to turn it around.
Yeah, and in just more ways than one. I mean, the national debt is so huge, it's hard to even think that even if we stopped spending tomorrow, even if we cut 50% of all of our federal spending, it would still be probably almost too far gone. It's really hard to think even theoretically of how we come back from this, and that's why it's great that you live at a ranch like this, because I tell you what, if I was listening to this podcast and I lived in like a apartment or a residential neighborhood, I would start looking at property immediately. I mean,
Probably not a bad time to run some cattle and grow a garden.
Even if you can't afford it, the dollar's about to be worthless anyway. So the property is only going to go up in value.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's kind of depressing, but I mean, at least guys like you are stepping up and trying to do what you can to make a difference. So what are you doing now?
So now I'm running for a state rep position. I kind of gave up on Congress for the meantime. I own a ranch outside of Winston, Oregon. So I actually live in the only safe Republican congressional district, which is great. So I might run for Congress again in the future, but we currently have a good congressman in office right now. He's a little bit more moderate for my tastes, but he's not the worst for sure. And so I'm just running for Oregon State House, which is my district, would run out to like Central Point, Oregon, kind of like that southern I-5 corridor, which is very safe, very Republican. I'm already through the primary, so I should win in November, and then I'll basically just vote no as much as possible and watch the Democrats pretty much get their way regardless. We don't have a lot of ways of stopping them unless we walk and try to prevent a quorum, which is where they don't have enough people to even take a vote at all. But they've done a lot to try to stop us from doing that in Oregon. If you do that, you can't run for re-election now. So their Democrats still run this state with an iron fist. But aside from that, I got a 250-acre ranch, got some cattle, got some horses. My girlfriend's a horse trainer. And I put a big shooting range in the back out. And
it's insane.
Yeah, it's super fun. So I'm honestly living my best life. Yeah, so it's going to be hard to go up to Salem when we're in session and spend that kind of time away from such a gorgeous property. I mean, you know what that's like. It's to have a property as nice as our properties are, you really don't want to leave. You hate leaving and just want to be back all the time. So it makes doing the job really hard. But Oregon needs good people in office, and the country needs good people in office. So someone's got to do it one step at a time.
Well, man, I'm glad you're doing it. Stepping up, a young guy. I think, a legit hero, combat experience. I think Oregon's frankly lucky to have you. And where can people go if they want to support you and help you with your election?
Oh, yeah. I think our website is alekfororegon.com on the internet if you want to donate, which I would appreciate. I'm also on like Facebook and Instagram and all that and Twitter. So, yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, is the Dems in Oregon try to push nonsense? You can let me know and I'll help you amplify it on social media.
I definitely will. You got a good Twitter account, so I'll let you know.
If nothing else, we'll blast them.
It's something stupid every session. I mean, one time they'll try to ban diesel trucks, and they'll try to ban AR-15s, and they're going to bring back a sales tax. I mean, I just don't know why people haven't woken up yet. I mean, you could say that about national politics. You could say that about Oregon politics, but it's like they keep running the state into the ground. Like, how bad do things need to get before people wake up? But
dude, like you go to Portland and huge swaths of it are like a cesspool. And it used to be a beautiful city. It was on all the like top 10 lists. And you're just wondering like, how bad does it have to get before people want to try something different?
Yeah. I mean, even you go to buy a car and there's a sales tax on vehicles now. And it's like, oh, when did this come up?
What
like,
irks me too is I call it a privilege tax.
yeah. Well, and the CAT tax too, the corporate activity tax. I mean,
That's insane.
They're creating all these taxes. They just get passed down to the consumer, and then cost of living goes up. Same thing with the federal government and printing money. But all these things just get passed down to either the taxpayer or the consumer, and the cost of living and taxes keep going up. And a lot of people just don't draw the correlation between that and their elected officials. I mean, if you want to play it safe, the best thing to do is just never vote for an incumbent politician. If you're not happy, I mean, the politicians that I follow are great and I love them, but pretty much that should be the default position. A politician should try to convince you as to why they deserve to get reelected. You shouldn't just vote to reelect them by default. That's just my opinion. But
yeah, absolutely, man. It's definitely time for like a mass retirement and get some new blood in there. So hopefully we can make that happen. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know with the small platform I have.
I'll hold you to that. So
yeah, absolutely. But otherwise, man, I'm just honored to have you as a friend, and we definitely need to do this again.
Yeah,
go shoot some guns out at your place.
That was a good time. Yeah,
I'm
always down. So let me know.
Yeah, we'll do it. Well, again, thank you, and we'll do it again soon.
Thank you, Dale Stark.